This is Inside the Life with Giovanni and Dutch, produced by the Mob Museum, presented by Levy Online and Levy Production Group. Giovanni, Rocco, and Dutch McAlpin are former police and federal task force operatives. They infiltrated drug cartels, outlaw motorcycle groups, and the Mafia. Now, they share their stories. In this episode, Dutch McAlpin tells his story for the first time and shares the harrowing details of his undercover work. This is Inside the Life.
Hey everybody, Giovanni, Rocco here. This is Inside the Life, coming to you from the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm really looking forward to this one because it's all about Dutch. We get to meet Dutch, we get to know what makes you, right? Who you are, what's inside there, like the movie said. But how you came to be, where you're at today. When did you become a police officer? When did you want to become a police officer? Let's start there.
I don't remember a defining moment in time, but I always knew it. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. Mm-hmm. It was a rural route place. Everyone around me, for the most part, was honest and kind and hardworking, blue collar. But for the most part, all the same.
Right.
And I don't know where along the line, I decided I wanted to do different, but I think it has something to do with the way we grow up. We talk about being good undercovers, being good cops first, and then being good undercovers. It's based on all of the experiences we had in our life. So I started out life in a small town in Iowa, growing up on a farm, hunting and fishing and working. And then, of course, as life has it, things change. So right. I think my mom was 17 when she had me, 36 when I graduated from high school.
Okay.
So my dad loses his job, and we go from this rural route, Iowa, and we move to Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is just outside of Detroit. When I get there, we're kind of exposed to a life and a culture we've never seen. Now, all of a sudden, my brother and I slept in a bunk bed in a bedroom, and then my dad's friends, Stanley and Garvin, slept in a bunk bed in the same room with us. Mm-hmm. My aunt slept on the couch. My sister slept in my mom and dad's room. Mm-hmm. Right. 2-bedroom apartment. We're rural route kids that grew up in Iowa, came from this all white environment basically. And now all of a sudden, my brother and I are getting on a school bus and we're riding a school bus to this really nice school. But when we get to the nice school, we have to get on another bus and go to a different school.
Okay.
And at first it's kind of scary because now, honestly, my brother and I are one of the very few white kids in the whole school.
Right.
And we've never been around that. But you start to play off these experiences. So I remember one time the bus driver was driving us to school. And I came from a bus where everybody sits quietly, they face forward to behave and do this. This had a lot more fun and excitement on it. And the bus driver had this ghetto blaster, the little,
radios.
Yeah, cassette player.
Like the boom boxes?
Yeah, boom
boxes.
Yeah. And he had it bungee corded to the window.
Right.
So I come from Iowa wearing a blue jean jacket and a hat and cowboy boots, and now all of a sudden I'm listening to LL Cool J.
Yeah.
LL Cool J is hard as hell. Battle anybody, don't care if you tell. I excel, they all fail.
I've heard you sing that before.
Yeah. All these other great experiences, but they're different experiences.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've been around an adult who's smoking marijuana around kids. It's the first time that I've lived in all this diverse culture. The only common ground is everybody was poor. Mm-hmm. And we lived there for about a year, and then we moved back to Iowa. And somewhere along the line, I started thinking about, I would like to be a cop. I think it'd be exciting. I think in the Ypsilanti area, I'd seen police kind of governing the community we lived in. I mean, it was a safe place for the most part. We ride bikes, jump bikes, do everything that you would do growing up. But we would see this different interaction with the police. And we didn't really look at them as bad guys. We kind of looked at them as keeping the peace, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And somewhere in that point, I think it kind of got in my head, I don't think I was trying to save the world, but I thought it'd be a fun job.
Right. And
I decided if I'm going to go to the military, then maybe that would make me a better opportunity to become a cop, to become a police officer. So I'm playing football, and the Iowa Army National Guard shows up,
right.
And they're serving watermelon to everybody. And I've already got in my head that if I go to the Army or go to the military, I'll do my time, and then when I get out, I can get on the job.
Right.
So these recruiters tell me, you can go to boot camp right now. So my junior year of high school, somehow I convinced my parents to sign off on the form. Mm-hmm. And 2 days after I get out of my junior year of high school, I'm at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Wow. Right.
I'm in Army boot camp. I come back 2 days before football practice started. But now I've been running 6 miles a day, doing push-ups, sit-ups, going through Army boot camp. Mm-hmm. And it's changed my mindset. It's given me focus. It's caused me to really think about...
More disciplined?
Yeah, definitely more disciplined.
Right.
And honestly, I can't wait to get out of school and get started now.
Right.
So I graduate from high school, go back to Fort Benning, do my advanced infantry training, I do another school there. And then I come back and I had a GI Bill, so I was going to go to college. But I didn't do that well in high school, so I didn't really apply myself. Mm-hmm. But one of my friends got me a job working in a jail. I was just doing the job. I was working midnight shifts, and I was seeing the cops come in and out of the jail, arresting people, doing all that stuff, and I was fascinated by it. Mostly I was excited. I just thought it'd be fun to do. The sheriff of the county said, you need to take the test to be a deputy sheriff. You're not old enough. They're not going to let you do it, but since you want to be a cop, let's let you take the test. So I took the test, and I passed it, but I wasn't going to get hired. Mm-hmm. I was 19, I think, at the time.
Okay.
Perfect scenario happens in a way, at least for me going into that job. One of the deputies loses his job. 2 other deputies leave and go to the state patrol or go to some other agency. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they're short-staffed. And the sheriff says, hey, you passed the test. You're on the eligibility list. You've been working here a long time. I called the Iowa Police Academy. You can't own a gun.
Right.
You can't buy any bullets.
Right.
But the sheriff's office can own your gun and buy your bullets. You're going to the academy next week.
Yeah.
So I ended up going through the Iowa Police Academy at 20 years old.
Okay.
I think I graduated from the police academy before I was 21. Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, I'm in a cruiser, working the streets, and I'm copping.
Right. And the only time you carry a gun, because you're 20, is when you're doing law enforcement, when you're working, actively, right? You couldn't carry the off-duty weapon because you were underage, right?
I couldn't own the gun.
Okay.
And I couldn't buy the ammunition, but I could carry it.
Right.
And I don't know who determined what was legal and what was not, but it was at the time. And so that's how I got my early career into law enforcement.
You transitioned into patrol? Patrol work was your first thing?
Yeah, initially, I was a regular deputy sheriff. The first shift I ever worked was 1 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Okay.
It was horrible, working overnight shifts. Back then, it was like the 90s. I graduated from the police academy, I think, in 96, and methamphetamine in the Midwest was really rampant. It was before the days of crystal meth. It was like crank days. We had a farming community in the counties that I worked, so there was a lot of anhydrous ammonia around.
Wow.
Anhydrous ammonia was one of the precursors for making methamphetamine. I don't know if you remember, like mini-thins.
Yeah.
Ephedrine. Mm-hmm. You could buy them at every truck stop.
Yeah.
So these guys are going around getting ephedrine, buying
off
it.
The shelves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And all of a sudden, at that time, even though I'm a kid, I'm dealing with basically a methamphetamine epidemic. Mm-hmm. Domestic violence is going up. Drugs are everywhere. It's everybody that's trying to make money or just trying to stay high is cooking dope. They've got these clandestine labs set up all around the state and every state in the Midwest, even the West Coast. But we had a drug issue. The sheriff at the time, the elected sheriff, loved us to enforce drug laws, so they ended up getting me a K-9. I became a K-9 officer. I think I was maybe 25 by that time.
So having a dog, you were able to go to more of when they did search warrants, the narcotic squads was hitting houses, you were called there to do searches? So it gave you more?
Well, we were a really small department. I think there was only like 10 guys on the department.
Okay.
So like on a midnight shift when I was working, I was the only one working. And I used to think, man, I don't want to be here. There's no room for growth here. But what I didn't realize at the time is I was learning everything that I would need to know when I finally would go to work undercover later in my career. Mm-hmm. I was writing my own search warrants.
Right.
And me and a couple of the other guys from different agencies around there were just, we were pulling trash. Mm-hmm. We were searching cars. We were basically just running, as uniformed patrol guys, running drug investigations.
Right.
And I had an opportunity to do a couple little undercover things at that time. Like, they weren't big deals, you know what I mean? But I was excited. I wanted to try it. No one had ever done it before. This is crazy, but I mean, right in that little community, I would just kind of change up my look.
Yeah, but as a young cop, I remember doing trash pulls, right? Now, trash pulls, they don't seem like a big thing, but trash pulls are, back in the day when we were able to, when you put your trash at the curb,
right,
that was pretty much you gave it up, right? And it wasn't your property anymore. And we were legally allowed to come take that, Right. But again, doing something silly like that is, is an intro to undercover work.
It
right?
is.
Because you're just going to steal garbage out of somebody's garbage can outside the front of the house. You know, you always went and got another can, took that garbage, made sure it was a white or a black garbage bag, whatever they had, and you wanted to replace it because God forbid they came out in the morning. So that was really your first exposure to undercover.
Yeah, you know,
you got
to take the uniform off.
Yeah,
you got to change in a different car.
Right.
So somewhere along there, I think I spent a few years there, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. I'm thankful for that part of my career, but I was not satisfied. I knew I wanted to go on to work. I wanted to work undercover. I just didn't know how I was going to. So I went to a different agency, another small community, and then from there, I ultimately ended up taking a job at the Bellevue, Nebraska Police Department. And that was a bigger city, so I had gone, once I got there, you know, we went from having 10 men on a department to having double that working a shift.
Okay.
You know, and you're working a district with maybe 10,000 people in it, where before you were working a county with 13,000 in a whole county, you know. So now I'm working in a metropolitan area, you know, Omaha, Nebraska. This area of rural America is actually a large metro. I know you've been there once, and it's a good-sized city.
Oh,
you know,
it is,
and it has good-sized city problems. So
your calls for service increased dramatically, right?
Yeah.
So you started seeing everything from that point on.
Yeah, I mean, even working as at the sheriff's office in a rural county, you see everything. You see all the bad things, all the good things, and then when you go to a metro, you go to a bigger place, you see it, more of it.
Right.
And probably more often, more extreme, and more of it. And it can be a bit overwhelming. But I knew I wanted to go to the narcotics division, but no one ever left there was a problem.
Okay. Somebody has to transition out to make a spot for you.
Yeah, I think in most metros or in most cities where the detective bureau is, those are the jobs that you kind of
sought after.
Yeah, and once you get them, you don't want to leave them.
Right.
For whatever reason, everything lined up perfectly. A narc job came up, and while I was working on the road, I was constantly going to training and constantly seeking out education. I went to a couple different undercover schools. Even though I wasn't working undercover, I was building my resume.
Okay.
And so when the opportunity came up, I got to turn my resume in. I got slotted. I went to the narc unit.
Okay. So you're doing arrests, investigations, handling informants. That's when you really started getting into the narcotics work. But now, how soon do you start getting your feet wet with undercover work?
Didn't really have an undercover program. We didn't really have guys and girls working undercover. We had surveillance team. We had people that were dressed down, and narcotics teams. We did everything. You know what I mean?
Right,
we did search warrants and investigations and surveillance and all kinds of different things.
Right. Well, you know, being you said surveillance, that's a sort of an undercover role, right? You're sitting there, you're under the dark of night or whatever you're doing, hiding in a car, hiding in a van, you know, like for 19 hours at a time. Sometimes you sit in a nice hot box. But yeah, then you finally start getting your feet wet doing buys.
Doing surveillance can be boring, but if you're paying attention, that's how you learn. That's how you learn the city. That's how you learn the neighborhood. That's how you recognize the behavior. You know what I mean? You can see when someone walks out and they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. You know, they're up to criminal activity because their demeanor changes, the way they walk, the way they talk. You can even see when the neighborhood knows something's off. There's a car that don't belong sitting up the road, and you start to realize what fits in and what doesn't fit in. Right. And I think you take those experiences and then you get to apply them to your undercover life when that happens, because you don't want to stand out too much, and you need to have purpose because you're the only thing that don't belong.
Right. I love the way you describe it because, again, it puts me right back to sitting in a van, and I remember exactly what you said. The way an individual comes out, leaves their house, walks out of a building, walks out of the house, walks out of a car, and they're doing this, the head's on a swivel, and you don't just pick somebody and go, that's the guy, we're going to sit on him all day. They always leave a trail of breadcrumbs. They always left you something.
So we had guys that were great at working informants, and I think informants, people that are willing to provide information, usually for some kind of a deal to help themselves out or whatever. Some people are great at working informants. Some people, like, honestly, I was good at talking to informants. I was good at understanding informants, but I never really had the passion. I didn't enjoy directing informants. Hey, go make this buy. Hey, go call this person. Go ask this person to do it. I always had this internal drive, like, I'd rather just do it myself, not to do it better, but I don't know. I was excited by it. I wanted to know what it's like to be inside that life.
Be in it, yeah. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
When was your first big, that you remember, when was your first big undercover buy?
kind of got pretty good at buying methamphetamine. That was our problem. That was our focus on buying methamphetamine from some Hispanics. And I get a call one day from a federal agent, and he says, "Hey, I hear you're buying amounts of methamphetamine from this particular place, this particular person.
Right.
And we have an interest in that. I'd like to meet with you." Mm-hmm. It was in South Omaha, predominantly Hispanic community and neighborhood down there. Mm-hmm. And I was going to different car dealerships, different places down there and meeting with different guys buying amounts of amphetamine. What I didn't know was that, you know, I knew what was happening metro-wide, or I knew what was happening within our state and within our immediate area. But what I didn't know at the time is how a lot of these investigations reach out so far. You know, they may be national or even international. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's when I guess got introduced to my big case. But once the federal agencies came in and started having me doing undercover stuff with them, all of a sudden the budget was bigger. The resources were bigger. Mm-hmm. The intelligence was broader. Right. And so I guess that was my first exposure to something bigger.
Major cases.
Yeah,
right?
major
What we
cases.
consider to be
Definitely.
major cases. Is that right, the pivotal point where the persona of Dutch was born?
Well, I think I found out early on that working undercover, it was best to tell as much truth as you can, because it's hard to tell a lie and it's hard to fake being genuine. And if you're around people that aren't genuine, you can sense it.
Right.
We've all been around a person before where we're like, that's a lie. Maybe you don't even call them out on it.
Right.
But you immediately lose interest in them. You're like, I don't really want to talk to this guy anymore because he's lying.
Lost credibility. Yeah.
Yep. So I think I learned early on that you needed to be as genuine as you could be, because that's believable. Right. Honestly, I think Dutch started when I was a kid, and as I was raised, and all those experience was creating Dutch. Dutch is just a name.
Yeah.
It's not who I am. It wasn't even a name I picked. It wasn't even a name that someone close to me picked. I was working a case, and they had a high level source providing information about an organized criminal group.
Right.
And we had spent a lot of time preparing for me to go be introduced to his group of people. It was an outlaw motorcycle club. And those guys are used to being infiltrated by the government. They're used to having informants tell on them. They're used to having undercovers work them. They're used to having wiretaps and investigations done against them. So they're pretty wily. They're pretty educated, and they're pretty suspicious.
Yeah, paranoid.
Right.
Rightfully
so.
Yep.
High-level government source is going to introduce me to some of these guys, some of these better guys who are accused of selling drugs and trafficking and doing all kinds of stuff. So we had sat down, and I had provided him with a bunch of information because he was going to say we'd known me for a long time. Well, he was going back and forth and telling them about me. Right. Preparing me to be introduced. I told him, I said, don't go in there. I'm not going to show up blind and be like, hey, guess what? Here's the guy. Right. I should need to talk about me ahead of time, talk about what I look like, talk about what I do. I need to be a real person before I ever meet them. They need to feel like they already kind of know who I am. It doesn't need to be a surprise. Well, he got so nervous on the very first time he started talking about me that instead of saying the name that we had talked about saying, which was an undercover name, he called me Dutch. And when I flew out and I was finally time to meet him, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I told him you're Dutch. I'm like, what do you mean? Why did you tell him I'm Dutch? He's like, I couldn't remember the name.
Couldn't remember, so I built you a new legend.
Yeah. Right. So Dutch is who I am. It's my personality. It's my experiences. It's everything that I've done and I become. But Dutch was just a name.
Just a name
to
that
me.
you took on. Yeah.
But from then on, what I found was, because I did have different identities, different names. I'm flying in and out of different cities now, and I'm traveling around the whole nation, really. I'm genuine and I'm staying mostly true, but I'm definitely living these different personas. It was easier to just be Dutch.
So many of us, you didn't know my real name, my birth name. I didn't know your birth name. I remember one time we were traveling somewhere, and the first time I ever found out your true birth name, and you told me, and I was like, what? Where'd you get that name from?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's my name.
My mom gave it to me.
That's the name my mother gave me. I'm like, that's the name your mother gave you? And I'm like, okay. Because I knew you so much as Dutch. And again, me selling you as Dutch, we relied on each other so much with it.
So the federal side approached me about working undercover for them. And in order to work undercover for them, they needed to get a baseline assessment of your mental health traits and your personality traits. Right. They sent me to a location, an offsite location that's protected for good reason. And I took a bunch of tests. I had walked into the room coming from working street level stuff, wearing a pair of Dickies and a white t-shirt, both of them way too big for me. And I walked into this place and I thought I was going to be around other people like me. And instead I walked into a room full of super intelligent people, multiple degrees, speaking multiple languages, just a lot of depth to them.
Right.
And they're wearing suits and got snacks and hardback books and backpacks and all these things going on. And I remember sitting around asking them where they're from and what they did. They're quietly answering me, but a bit standoffish, like I don't belong, because I didn't feel like I belong. Then we start taking all the tests, and I felt like that movie Men in Black when Will Smith goes and sits in those like egg-shaped chairs, and they're going to take the written test, and he slides the table over.
Sit on a big
He's like,
couch.
you want to get
like
down on this?
kid?
Yeah, I felt like that guy on Men in Black.
That makes sense. Now that you described it, because I lived the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And what he's describing is it's the series of psychological tests that we have to go through.
They wanted to establish a mental health trait and a personality trait, and they wanted to identify that you possess certain mental health traits and certain personality traits that would allow you to potentially be successful, working in the stress, making decisions without a whole lot of guidance necessarily. And they had over time developed a scientific process that developed certain traits that they thought give you a better opportunity for success, less probability to be hurt or damaged, and less probability to be turned bad.
Burn an asset. Right.
Well, I think they did it with the intention
they had good
protecting us and
protecting
and protecting the system itself, because like I was saying, in order to be a good undercover, you need to live at the highest level of integrity. And so I think they needed to identify those traits that leaned toward you having high integrity and good decision making.
At that point in your career, in my career, you're not doing street level narcotics purchases anymore. You can be around the globe. You can literally be working anywhere around the world. And it wasn't like you had a team of guys with you. Sometimes you had to go out by yourself, and you were lucky to have a cover team. I would imagine you had a lot of those. Some of the OMG guys, the outlaw motorcycle groups you were with, like, you were with them all the time. Like that probably took a mental toll on you and just drained you, because it's always, and even the white supremacist groups that you had in, those guys are at a different level of just anxiety, paranoia. Those guys are not easy to be around. Like me, if I'm around business guys and I'm at a dinner and everybody's behaving themselves in a 5-star restaurant, that's one thing, right?
Yeah.
And I was on the other side when I'm at a double wide trailer eating dog biscuits with them because they, that's dinner tonight and they shared it with us. But you put yourself in these situations for so many years and so many different cases that the propensity for violence and the situations, because I know all your stories, the things that you did and the way you would go above and beyond to put yourself into a case. And I didn't know many guys like you. There's not many guys that would do the things that you did. Other people would go, I'm not going in there unless somebody else comes with me.
Yeah.
And you just like, hey man, if I got to be the only guy, sometimes we were, right? We each did that. But you repeatedly just put yourself in situations with the most violent individuals on the planet. So
selfishly, I love the adrenaline.
Yeah.
I love the excitement. I
know you do.
I'd be lying to say that I didn't want it to be dangerous. I wanted it to be dangerous. I wasn't trying to be reckless.
Listen, I often say that's my addiction. Adrenaline was my addiction. The more, and you and I had that. I could say that. I could speak for the both of us and say, yeah. So it's going to be really dangerous? Yeah. So how violent? How many murders? How many? Would these guys kill each other?
Yeah.
Informants. You find them easy to work with?
I found them
Bad
necessary. I
experiences?
found them necessary to work with. I don't think easy is the word at all. Not at all. I mean, they're very complicated. They're people. People are complicated. The benefit that we had working undercover is, we could go in and out of the life.
Right.
Inside the life is pretty difficult sometimes. There's a lot going on, and you don't trust anybody. So the problem with the informants is they always had to stay inside the life. We got to kind of come in and out.
They don't get a breather.
Yeah. And so when you're trying to make sure that you keep an informant credible, you try to make sure that they're telling the truth. You try to keep them clean. By clean, I mean they're not committing crimes they don't have permission to commit or they're not supposed to be doing. It's a tough balancing act.
As an undercover, it's really tough.
Yeah.
I mean, we have SWAT teams on the outside, right? You have rescue teams to come in and rescue us, but there's no evac plan when you're with an informant, you know? And so many times you put your life, and I put my life in an informant's hand. You know, you have to trust that individual. You get to know them as an individual. You get to know their family. And I would imagine you've had guys you've come to be close with, not defending them and, you know, helping them out. But yeah, you've gotten not too close, but you get to know their personal life.
There was a time I needed to fly to another state. I was concerned that they would be looking into where I came from and how I got there, and my story needed to match. So I literally flew to New York, upstate, I think Rochester. I went to a little town outside of Rochester, and I slept on a floor in an apartment with the informant and his wife. It wasn't because I wanted to.
Right.
I was actually going to California and working, but I was saying that I was coming from New York, so I needed an airline ticket coming from New York to California. And also because we were going to be spending so much time with people that knew him and knew him well, I needed it in my own mind to know what this area that he lived in looked like, what his house looked like, what his wife was like. So I spent the night on his floor, and I talked to his wife, and I was like, where did he get that tattoo?
Right.
And I asked them about this, and I asked them, they cooked me chicken and rice, and they made up a meal that is kind of like something they grew up with and the community they grew up in. And so those moments actually made it more genuine and more easy.
The hospitality.
But it wasn't fun. You know, I didn't want to sleep on a floor in a teeny little apartment and intrude on their lives or anything like that. It was just necessary.
Right. Yeah, it's necessary for our line of work.
Yeah.
For them, it's not, right?
No. But he's scared to death too. He doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to get found out. He doesn't want to get indicted. He doesn't want to get in trouble. He just wants everything to go away. So I guess to lean on your point,
right?
They're our lifeline in a way. They're the person that's vouching for you. But we're also their lifeline because we're their way out.
Sometimes they don't get out. So, you know, you go into some sticky situations not knowing, is this guy or girl that's the source, they're not trained like we are. You know, they have no training whatsoever.
Right.
So if they go into a situation and hit the panic button, you know, and start just, you know, they want out, I want out, and we got to clean that mess up.
They can provide the most real information direct while it's happening live. As far as problems with informants, I mean, constantly. They didn't pay their phone bill. You can't get a hold of them. The car don't run. It won't start. There's nobody to watch the kid. We need them to do a controlled buy, and there's nobody to watch the kid. And they don't have transportation. They have a phone. They didn't pay their rent. So those kind of problems. Also, like you said, without getting too close to them, well, most of them you can kind of keep a distance with, but certain ones would come and you would feel a little more connection to them. You know what I mean? Especially as you had success, the cooperating source is doing his job or her job, introducing you as an undercover and building you up. And now you're having success. You kind of become friends, you know? I had a case I was working. This was a high level source. He was providing lots of information on a cartel group. We're in the Midwest. This guy had been setting up drug deals between several local people in the Midwest, and the cartel groups he had a car dealership, and they were bringing in cars packed with dope.
Right.
You know, kilos, pounds, depending on what they're hauling in. They bring them into this car dealership. They pull the fenders off or the rocker panels or whatever. A lot of times for transporting these large amounts of drugs, they bring them from in automobiles, right? And they got pretty good at doing auto body stuff. So a lot of times they bring them to this car dealership, unload them, and he had a connection to a cartel group because he had grown up down in Mexico and he had been exposed to those types of people. When he moved to the Midwest, he started a car dealership. They reached out to him and they basically said, we want to start bringing our large drug loads into your car dealership and you need to find people to buy them for us.
Right.
He's a high level source. He's been getting paid a lot of money to provide information, which is very helpful. I mean, he set up a deal between the cartel and another group. It was for $50,000. All he did was middleman it. Right. He was just a guy in between. So he basically introduced the cartel guys to a buyer in the Midwest. And it worked very well for a long time. He wasn't really getting his hands dirty. He was just in the middle. They'd bring the dope in. His guys would take it out. He would find someone to buy it. And he was just the middleman, and they would take care of him a little bit. Right. Well, at some point, this person didn't pay the debt. It was $50,000. So the cartel sent up a group of guys and said, hey, you don't only owe us $50,000 now, you owe us $150,000. Here's a list of your family down in Mexico. We're going to kill them all. And we know where you live and we want your house.
Right.
So he called a federal agency as a lifeline and said, this is what's happening. This is what I've been doing. He's terrified.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Right. I'm working on a local narc unit and I'm buying drugs around the area, and they find out that I have a connection to some of these guys. So they tell me the story. They're like, hey, this guy has been providing information. We've given him a lot of money and he's providing good information. We feel his life is in danger. So we would like to bring you in to buy drugs from these people they sent up to collect this debt from, hoping that if he introduces you, it'll take the pressure off of him. Basically, by introducing me, I can become someone that can buy
a source of income
and help repay that debt that he owed.
Right.
And they thought that it might alleviate it. It's really hasty and quick. Like, there's not time to plan. These guys are here. They're basically telling him they're going to kill him and his family, and they want me to do this. So I take the money. I agree to do the deal. It's not the smartest thing to do. I've never met the source. I don't know the guy, and he's going to be introducing me, and he's never even seen me before. But because I felt obligated and I wanted the excitement, I agreed to do it. They hand me the money. I take out, I had a long ponytail at the time. I had all these hair ties.
Yeah.
Break it up like an inch all the way down. So I took out some hair ties and I started to break the money into smaller amounts, like 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. But some in my sock, one in each couple of pockets, hid some money around on me. And they tell me, don't worry, it's just going to be you and these one cartel guy and the source. And they try to describe the source to me. And they try to describe the place to me. I've never been to this place before. But I feel comfortable because they seem to know what they're talking about. And they assure me it's just going to be one guy. I'm just going to walk in and buy these drugs and I'm going to leave and everything's going to be happy. So I show up and it's a car dealership, like a buy here, pay here dealership where they sell cars. They work on cars. There's a big garage floor in one part. There's kind of like a display room in one part. There's an office in the back. But it's not in the nicest neighborhood. So one side of the building's covered in graffiti.
Okay.
And then there's a back alley that runs down the back. I think there's like a Burger King across the street. It's a square block area, but this takes up a good chunk of it. And I think probably everybody in the whole area knew what was going on in that shop, but I agreed to do it. So I walk in thinking I'm just going to meet this one guy. And I walk in and there's a number of Hispanic guys there. I don't know which one I'm supposed to talk to. So I ask for the person I'm told to ask for. And they point to the back, to this office area. And it's kind of dark in the showroom. So I just kind of walk back and I see this guy. He's got a nice shirt on. He's dressed well. And he's standing at the entrance to the office door. Right. And I ask for this guy and he waves me in. I'm being a little guarded about saying this guy because he was a high-level government source. And I don't want to say his name. Right. He deserves to be safe from that. So I think this is the guy I'm supposed to meet. He waves me over like this. I walk confidently right into the room. As soon as I walk in the room, I hear the lock click behind me. Right. And they told me it was just going to be me and one other guy. As soon as I walked in, I heard the door locked. I felt this like sudden fight or flight instinct, you know? I was like, oh man, I'm in big trouble because there's not just one guy in here and the door is locked behind me. I can tell this guy behind me has a gun. There's a guy standing to my right by a desk. There's a big desk there. There's a guy sitting behind the desk wearing all black. And he looks like he's definitely in charge. And there's a guy in a roller chair, like one of them office chairs, you know, on rollers. And he's backed into the corner. And he looks terrified. And I can see his carotid artery beating out of his neck. And then there's another guy on my left. And on this desk is this Tupperware container. They used to take these like clear Tupperware containers. And they would fill them full of crystal meth. And they'd wrap them in cellophane. Then they'd cover them in red axle grease. And then they'd cellophane them again. Well, this has already been cut open. The lid's off. And there's these shards of crystal meth. If you ever seen like rock salt and stuff like that, it looks like that, but imagine like an icicle that hangs off the side of your...
I think of it as Superman's den, like the big shards of ice.
Yeah, the icicles that come off like your gutter in the wintertime, they freeze. There's these giant shards of crystal meth laying there. But I sense immediately that something's wrong in the room, and I realize right away, based on the guy who's terrified in the corner, that he's the source, whose life's in danger. And I'm now surrounded in a room full of guys, and I need to find out how to get out of here. So I pick up this shard of crystal meth, and I just grab it. I'm like, whoa! I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. And I look at the guy in the corner. I'm like, this is what I've been looking for. This is the shit I want. And I look around the room. I'm like, who's the man? Who's the man? Who's getting paid? Yeah. And everybody I think is kind of stuck. They're like, their plan was, he owes them money. He tells them about me. I can come buy a pound for $25,000. They get 25 of the 50,000 they're owed. They'll take the money, probably never turn it in, kill us both, and go back to Mexico.
Yeah.
Well, I pick up this shard and I just start making a big deal. I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. And I take out a wad of money out of one of the wads I had for my hair tie, and I had it in my pocket, and I take it out. I'm like, who's the man? Who am I paying? And I looked at the guy behind me, and I told him, hey, you better get busy counting money. And I hand him the money. He goes up to the desk. He breaks it open. And he starts counting money. And I'm like, well, you ain't the man. I'm like, who's the man? Who am I paying? And nobody's saying anything. But the guy dressed in black behind the desk is clearly the man. Mm-hmm. He's the one that I know I can negotiate my way out of this room with.
Right.
But I still can't figure out how to get out of the room. So I look at this guy. I'm like, you better get to counting money. And I hand him money. He starts counting money. And I look at that guy, and I'm like, this is the best shit I've ever seen. But I need another pound. I need another pound in an hour. And I said, I didn't bring all the money because I knew I was going to potentially get robbed. So I'll take this pound for $25,000. I'll go get another $25,000. I'll be back in an hour.
Right.
I'm taking this with me. And oh, by the way, this ain't all the money. You better get to counting money. I hand him money. And I can see this look on his face like he's processing like.
But he can't.
He can't walk away from the money.
Right.
So I just reach back and I unlock the door. There's like one of them Walmart white plastic bags with this Tupperware container, all this crystal meth in it.
Yeah.
And I just kind of quickly wrap it up, and I'm talking to him like, I'm going to get the rest of the money. I'll be back in an hour. And I unlock the door and I just walk out. Mm-hmm. And I make it my way out to the parking lot. And I meet up with the case team and everybody out there. And I tell them what happened. So instead of him going away and me becoming a source, they realize too, like, this isn't going to end well. Like, he's not going to let these guys walk away. Mm-hmm. If he comes back with more money, it's going to be over. So these guys leave. They put a surveillance team on him. He goes to pick up another pound of crystal meth. On the way back, they traffic stop the car. They take off these cartel guys that were sent up to hurt everybody or kill this guy. And they're now out of the picture. Mm-hmm. Well, this source looks at me like I've saved his life. I didn't do anything. I did what they asked me to do. Mm-hmm. But to him, it was very personal. You know, I saw the fear when he was sitting in a chair. I saw the carotid artery in his neck beaten. And he thought I had saved him. Well, we became friends. We got to talking about that over time. And over time, he started to set up more and more deals. So often that I was in that office once or twice a week, maybe.
Okay.
Buying a pound or more of crystal meth. You know, at that time, a pound was around 20,000 or more. Mm-hmm. So there were pretty sizable drug deals for a crystal meth deal in the Midwest at the time. Mm. And he has gotten so good that he's got the cartel bringing in all kinds of drugs. And I had one of the guys that he had identified, I had been buying, I'd bought 8 pounds of crystal meth. I go in, buy a pound from him, go in, buy a pound from him. And so he was indictable. He was able to be prosecuted. We had him identified. And the source called me and said, hey, these guys that you've been buying crystal meth from got 60 kilos of cocaine. Mm-hmm. And he just brought it in. Do you want to buy some cocaine? So I call a case agent. Mm-hmm. I'm like, hey, he's got 60 pounds of cocaine. And he says, nah, we don't need to buy the cocaine. Right. Because he's already indictable.
Right.
Okay, fine. Well, apparently he calls the source and says, what about this cocaine? He's like, well, you said you guys didn't want it. But I know these other guys, and these were some gang members. And apparently he had dealt with them before when he had set the cartel bring in cocaine. He had facilitate a deal between them and these guys, and they'd buy the cocaine. He said, they called me. They're looking for a couple kilos of cocaine. Mm-hmm. So with good intention, the case agent and the team decides, well, we'll have him set up a dope deal between this gang member guys and these cartel, this other cartel guy.
Right.
And he says, I want you to go into the office and watch this deal go down. And I said, well, I can't do that. And he said, why? I said, well, I've already been buying crystal meth off of him, and he asked if I wanted cocaine, and I said no.
Yeah, why would
so now I can't just be hanging out in this office. Mm-hmm. I can't be hanging out in here while they do a drug deal. It's not going to look right. He's like, okay, well, I want you on a surveillance team because you can roll the lot, you can drive through, you can kind of come in close and tell us what's happening. We're going to do a controlled buy with these guys. So we do a buy, I do surveillance. It goes good. Everything goes well, except there was a couple of rental cars that showed up in their neighborhood that didn't belong. Remember we were talking about doing surveillance. When you know the neighborhood and you know what's happening, there's things that start to stand out. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that car's got out-of-state plates on it. It's way too nice for this neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Clearly, it's a rental. But we just thought, well, maybe they're doing surveillance on these guys. They're doing, even the bad guys do stuff to protect their money and their load and their dope and then what they got going on. So it wasn't really that suspicious. Mm-hmm. Now, about a week or two later, these same guys call, and they're like, hey, we want to get a couple more kilos. They up the amount. Not so much that it was suspicious, but now they wanted to up an amount. So they drove up, and we're sitting outside. I'm actually sitting about a block away at a stop sign. I got the seat laid back. I'm just got the air conditioning on. I don't really want to be there because it's boring. We had a briefing. It was going to be a controlled delivery. It was going to just take a little bit of time. We're going to go ahead and pay the money, take the kilos, and leave, and that's going to be that. Well, I'm sitting there, and one of the surveillance guys said, hey, a car just showed up. So they tell me, hey, Dutch, go roll up there and see what's going on. Something doesn't seem right. So I said, okay. So I'm driving down the street. I don't really think much is going on, but I see this car pull up on the curb. And it's a rental car. There's 4 dudes in there. And they're getting out. And like I said again, when you're doing surveillance, you start to recognize, like, that's not right. That doesn't look right.
Heart starts pumping.
One thing, it's hot as shit. And these guys are wearing hooded sweatshirts. And I see one get out of the back passenger seat. He gets up. I'm driving down the road. He doesn't even look at me. He puts his hood up, and he starts walking down the alley behind the building. I see another guy get out of the driver's seat, and he's clearly kind of like directing people. You know what I mean? This guy's going down the alley. Another guy got out of the other side. He walked around the building and kind of took up a position in the front, just kind of like walking around in a lot.
Right.
I turn the corner, and as I go up the corner, I see there's another guy going down the other side of the building. It's surrounded. And so I get on the radio, and I tell the surveillance team, I say, hey, this is going to be a rip. They got the place surrounded. This is going to be a rip. I go back around the block. As I come around the block, I happen to have a vest, like a kit, a raid vest, that police on it, has mags and all that shit in it. I stop the truck, and as I reach back to get my vest, I hear gunshots. Poof, 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 just shooting. And then I hear there's two guys listening to like a transmitter. We had recording devices in there. We had video recording, all this stuff going on. And there's a pretty good transmission going that day. And one of them just starts screaming. You know when like the inflection in the voice changes, and he's like, shoot out, shoot out, shoot out.
Yeah. Panic.
Yeah. And everybody, you can just sense there's just kind of a moment of like, oh shit, this is really happening. We do this all the time, and we've always thought this could happen, but it's happening.
But now it's happening.
So I pull up to the stop sign, and I see these guys come running out of the building. They're jumping in these cars, and they're shooting back at the building. Like boom, 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 boom. Just, you can see it hitting the brick, like the dust coming off the wall, you know, when it hits. And
the impact. And
and there's people walking around. Like, it's still just a regular old city block community, and people are kind of ducking down or just even looking at a surprise. But I know what's going on. So they jump in this car, and they kind of do a U-turn, and they take off down the road. And I just sit at the stop sign for a second. So I'm like, hold on, everybody's going to go there. And as soon as this car comes right by me, I can see there's at least 3 dudes in the car. Because I said there was one in the alley, one in the backside, and then one going in. Well, 3 of them are in this car, and they take off flying past me. And then here's this minivan with 2 of these surveillance and security guys, and they're chasing them. So I'm like, all right, they got these guys under control. And then I see this Tahoe, who I know to be the guy that I'd been buying crystal meth from, who brought the 60 keys of cocaine.
Oh, okay.
And he's just lollygagging down the road. He's just driving, minding his own business, you know? And I'm like, that doesn't look right. I'm going to follow this guy. They're chasing that guy. Everybody else is going to where the shooting happened or whatever happened. All I know is just been a bunch of bullets flying. So I just jump in behind this guy. He's driving down the road. He's driving kind of erratically. And he's braking, he's going, he's braking, he's going, and he kind of starts to take off. And as I pop the hill, I see that there's been a head-on collision. And the 2 security and surveillance guys are now out of the car. They're standing in the middle of the road. They got rifles pointed down. And there's smoke coming out of the car. And this black Tahoe, who brought the 60 keys, is rolling down toward him. I don't know who shot who yet. I don't know what's went down. But nobody knows about the guy in the Tahoe except for me. So I have to come out of my undercover role. I've been working undercover buying methamphetamine from this guy. I've been in this office a dozen times or more buying dope. And I'm not saying I obeyed any rules or did anything right. I just did what I had to do. I just passed the guy in my truck. I just passed him. I cut him off. I put a gun out the window. I walked up. I grabbed him, took him out of the truck. By now, all the security and surveillance is coming in. You know, it's like just lights and sirens. Everybody's coming because, well, for one, we're a covert team operating in a neighborhood. The neighborhood's now calling 911. There's been a shooting, so we have black and whites. We got uniformed guys. We got helicopters. Everybody's coming in, and no one knows what's going on,
what you're doing,
except for us. And I honestly, I don't look like a nice guy. I mean, I'm covered in tattoos. I'm wearing Dickies and a T-shirt, and I got a gun in my hand.
Gun pointed at another guy.
Yeah. Right. I get him on the ground, and another one of the surveillance guys comes up and handcuff him, and I come around the corner, and the car's hit another vehicle head on. There's 2 people in the car that are hurt, but these guys are not really complying. They're moving away from the vehicle. There is cocaine everywhere. And there's bullets laying on the ground. I think there was a gun laying by one of the cars. One guy's kind of half-assed getting down. And so I go up to him. He's got the hooded sweatshirt. The hooded sweatshirt stood out to me so much because I remember it was like purple and yellow and all these bright colors. And it was so hot. And I kept thinking, man, why is he wearing a hooded sweatshirt? But he's the one I saw getting out of the car, reaching in his waistband, putting his hood up. So I went right up to him.
Wow.
Got him down on the ground. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm not trying to make this sound like I was doing all these great things. I was just in the place
moment
to have to do it. Yeah. But working undercover, working with sources, that's where we're at. So now this guy's cuffed up and the other guys take off running. So I take off running after him and I grab one of the guys out of the minivan. He doesn't even have a vest on. He doesn't have anything that says police.
Right.
I don't even look like a cop. I'm covered in tattoos wearing dickies, but at least I have a vest on. It says police. It's not buckled and I don't have enough bullets. I have 6 rounds.
Right. No cause for pause.
I wasn't ready for it, I have 6 rounds in a baby Glock,
Yeah.
and I'm chasing these guys. I know there's been a shootout. And this one guy basically comes out between 2 houses, grabs one of the guys by the hood, spins him around, gets him on the ground. It's pretty exciting shit. It's definitely fun, but terrifying. And the other guy's gone down the alley. So now me and this other guy are making our way down the alley, trying to catch up to the guy, but also now it's starting to set in how serious it is.
Right.
Like these guys definitely want to get away. Somebody's definitely was shot. I remember came on the radio. I said, the source has been killed. He's DOA. He's dead on arrival. He's dead on scene. And I heard it. And I was like, oh man, the guy that I knew, the guy that I had thought to be my friend, the guy that I got to know, that I recognize as a human being,
right,
is dead. I just recognize that. And I'm chasing the last guy down the alley. So we take off running down the alley, chase this guy all the way down. He finally basically runs out. He's not even from the same city. He's from a different city in the Midwest. And he's standing in the middle of Blacktop Road. He hears all the lights and sirens. He realizes there's no place to go. And we put him down on the ground. We handcuff him. And that was the day that this high-level government source was killed, which was the guy that brought me into doing this undercover work. It wasn't by his design or his plan, but because of the situation he was in, gave me the opportunity to work undercover. And now it's been a couple of years, and I've got to know this guy. So the same person that brought me in and got me to the level I was working at was killed that day.
Right. And you got to process it. Right.
Yeah.
Then you go
But
home.
you also got to go back to work.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the rebound from that. Right. Because that's intense and insane, and that happens. But how soon were you into another case?
Well,
you had other cases going on too at the time.
Yeah, and that part. That's crazy. So the day that this guy went down on the ground, we handcuff him. We've just been involved in this big thing. I've just found out the source has been shot, and my phone rings. And when it rings, I answer the phone. I'm like, hello? And it's somebody from another state for an undercover case I'm supposed to be starting. They're like, hey, are you ready? Dutch, are you ready for the conference call? And I'm like,
sorry, I missed it.
I'm literally standing over top of this guy, right? He just got a pair of handcuffs on. And there's still cop cars and everybody coming in and helicopters flying around. I'm like, oh, I can't take the call today. I'm sorry. I'm apologizing. Like somehow I'm putting off their schedule. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's just your mindset. So basically by that Monday, I'm back on that case working that one. But I was also working one of the top 10 outlaw motorcycle clubs, probably in the nation. You got your diamond clubs, your 1%ers. And there's many of those clubs throughout the country and world, but they have different ones they consider to be top 10. So it's one of the top 10 outlaw motorcycle clubs. I'm working on that on the West Coast. I'm also working on a white supremacist case down south, which is what I took the conference call about.
Right.
And I'm also working, the large prostitution ring on the East Coast. So out in Philadelphia, New York, that area out there, they had an organized crime group that was bringing in Chinese women, to be exact, from overseas and putting them into prostitution to pay off gambling debts for the organized crime groups in China. So I'm working all these cases at the same time.
Inside the life. That's inside the life of. So how did you mitigate it? How did you, after the incident with the informant, did you take time?
No.
Process it?
No
time to process.
No, there was no time to that. No, I mean we didn't get home on time that night. That changed a lot of things. but now transitioned from a long-term drug case to a murder case. You know, that changed the way that we continue the case. But at the same time, we're still busy. So how do you mitigate it? I mean, it sits in your head. I went home and I stayed up later than I should, and I just thought about the stuff that happened, but that's it. You got to go back to work.
Yeah.
You know, I carried these like white legal pads with me everywhere I went because we're working so many cases. Like I said, you got 6 cell phones, you got laptops, you got all these things going on. And at some point, you gotta maintain the integrity of the case. You have to document what's happening. You have to have all the details, and it's got to be true and correct. So I started carrying these white notebook pads with me. And when I would fly from place to place, I would get these white notebook pads out. And instead of typing, because I didn't want to type, because I needed to get it out, and I would just write them in hand. I'd write down the details, dates, times, what the person looked like, what this name was, what they said, what they do. I think that's why it's easy for me to recollect so much of the detail, because that we really were collecting that intelligence, and I just kept writing it down. I remember one time, this pharmacist sitting on an airplane behind me, and she sent me a glass of wine, and I took the wine and I was like, okay, thank you. She goes, are you writing a book? And I didn't know what to say because I'm working covert and I don't know. You never trust anybody. When you're flying a plane, they're going to the same place you're going. You don't want to tell them what you're doing. So I said, no. I said, I work in sales. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, I write down every detail about the customer I met. Did he like his dog? Did he like his kids? Did he like this? Did he do this? I said, I take every detail I can think about that person. So when I call him back, I can say, hey, Giovanni, how's the dogs?
How's Snoopy doing?
The kid's still playing soccer? How's that going? She's like, oh man, that's a great idea. I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was true, but I wasn't selling anything.
Yep. Yeah. But you're so paranoid when you do it because you're afraid. Again, my criminal cases are one thing. Now I'm on a plane. Now FCI brain kicks in because it could be a foreign asset trying to infiltrate me on a plane like we do to people when we do bumps. And then you become like so fucking paranoid. It's like, why you ask me about my notebook? Why is this guy sitting next to me? Is he supposed to be sitting next to me? And are they doing to me what we do to them? Right?
Yeah, I can see how you think that. You know,
if you work
honestly, to tell you the truth, it didn't seem that weird to me. I'm like, no one writes on a notebook. Everybody has a laptop out and they're typing and everything, but mine never worked right.
Yeah,
the ones they gave us, I had 3 laptops on them.
No, I always, and I still to this day, I carry my 3 and 5 subject notebook. Everything I do in my life, everything I do has a date up top, has the date in the corner of the page on the top left page, and you're just trained to do that, you know. And I've carried that into what I do now for a living.
When you work the street, when you're a street cop, I always carried a notebook in my pocket right here. Because there was constantly, you have to flip through, write something down, take notes, take notes.
I have all my notebooks. Even the little ones from patrol.
Yeah.
You know, I saved everything I ever had. You know, because you look back at them and the details that are in there, right? You know, it puts you right back to it. It's weird. So without getting into too much detail with the motorcycle club, and we'll transition into that case, I know the outcomes of the cases. I know the things that you're going to say to me. So it's tough for me to sit here, you know, and I know the emotional roller coaster that you're going through when this happened, right? You and I talked, I think, the whole damn thing, you know, you and I were in touch with each other. But then there's also the fact that, so let's just out of the pan and into the fire, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like you just said, you know what? After that incident, maybe I should just take some ground balls, you know? Like, let's just take a break and give me some layups, give me some nice, easy jobs. Nah, let's go right into some OMG stuff. And let's just, you know what? Maybe I should just infiltrate one of the most violent and powerful ones in the nation. So how did that come about?
At some point we were talking about working sources, and I said I had slept on the floor of this source's house so I could get to know him and his wife.
Right.
So now I'm traveling to California. I'm getting introduced by this source to this group of outlaw motorcycle clubs. Are big. They're nationwide. They're maybe even worldwide. It's not like I was working an undercover case on the entire club.
Right.
There was members of this club that were involved in drug trafficking in California. So it was like other drug cases, except that they're considered an organized crime group.
Yeah.
And so I'd spent a bunch of time with his informant. Now it's time for me to go out and meet these guys. I'm going to be buying crystal meth, and I've put together in my head that I'm buying crystal meth and taking it to the East Coast and selling it because that's where I was from, according to my story.
Right.
So I remember kind of preparing for that. You know, I'd done all the studying I could. I'd done all the things I could. But I don't know if you remember, like sometimes when you're working in another state, and you're so busy with all these different cases, your imagination paints a picture in your head of what you're going to meet, what these people are going to look like, how they're going to act. And I'm not going to lie to you, man. I wasn't prepared for this. So I had rented a Jeep Cherokee. It was a nice car. And it's a motorcycle club, but I'm not in the club.
Right.
I'm just going to buy drugs from these guys that are in the club. Well, they had this like old, have you ever seen them hotels? The hotels where you like park in front of the door?
Yeah.
And then maybe there's like an upstairs to them. So they got the steel staircases go like this. And then there's 2 floors. You can park in front of your lower floor door. And then you might park over here and you can walk up to the 2nd floor first. Right. Just 2 floors. There's a couple different buildings. They got the whole place. It's surrounded by a fence and it has a gate.
So it's a compound.
It's a compound. It has a gate, a security gate. Open and closes, open and closes. I remember pulling up to the gate and I was surprised that there was a gate. There's a security gate. You couldn't just go in and out of here. Right. I was like, okay, I'm going in here. Oh. So the source calls one of the head guys. They don't say nothing. They just open the gate. We drive in. And we're sitting in the parking lot. I'm getting ready to get out. And I'm looking around and there's pit bulls everywhere.
Yeah.
This compound's all fenced in. And I remember like,
just walking
even
around.
the dogs look scary.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, these big old burly pit bulls are walking around a yard everywhere. We go walking in and he takes me up to meet one of the main guys. And part of me was impressed. I mean, they're covered in tattoos, they're scary looking, but he had raw denim jeans on pressed to a T. He had these white shoes with a cuff at the bottom. And his shirt was pressed. It was a little big, but it was pressed neat. I mean, he had like, all these guys, honestly, had this like presence about them. You know what I mean? They definitely seemed to be in control, and it was a bit intimidating. So I roll in, I'm talking, the guy introduces me. Hey, this is Dutch. I've been telling you about Dutch. Dutch is here. And right away, and keep in mind, these outlaw motorcycle groups have been infiltrated tons of times. They've had wiretaps done on them. They've been investigated, and so they're pretty educated, pretty suspicious.
They assume anybody new is dirty.
Yep.
Yeah.
And right away, this guy starts, I don't know that he's interrogating me. He's like, where'd you say you come from? What did you say you do? And I'm answering the questions, but the source has given the story that I told him to give them, but he messed it up. And the guy's like, so you're from New York? Yeah, I mean, I used to live there. Right. Oh, but you used to live in California? No, I've never been here. You've never been here? No, I've never been here. And I'm sticking to the story that I told because that's what we agreed on. But this guy's making me feel like that's not the story he heard, you know? So he's like, oh, okay. Well, I thought you used to live here. I'm like, no, I've never been here before. He had to tell me how to get here. I don't even know how to get here. Right. He's been here before. I've never been here before. I'm not kidding you. He turns around to walk away and he's got eyeballs tattooed on the back of his head.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh, man.
He
knows.
See me. He's watching.
So they have somebody called an enforcer.
Right.
An enforcer is a guy that would probably carry out, I suppose, anything they need to be done. The word of the name alone says what they do. The enforcer. He says, let's go downstairs. I want you to meet my enforcer. And he says him by name. My heart's beating. I'm pretty nervous because I've never met these guys. Now we're in a gate that's locked behind us. I just met this guy. He doesn't seem to believe anything I said. And we go downstairs. I want to meet the enforcer. I'm like, I just got here. I don't know if I should be meeting the enforcer. The door's open when we get down there. And this dude is standing there. And the head guy goes, hey, get the fuck out here. Dutch is here. He's like, what? He said, get out here. Dutch is here. And I'm imagining in my mind what this guy's going to look like, the enforcer. Instead, this pit bull comes walking out, right? He just comes mean. He's all swelled up. He comes walking right up to me, like sniffs me, turns around and walks away. And I was like, oh, man, even a dog knows I'm a cop, right, man. Now. I'm in big trouble. This is not going to go good. Right. And then this guy comes walking out. He's got a pair of shorts down to his knees, no shirt. His face is completely tattooed. Yeah. He has outline of the state around his face. He's got numbers tattooed on it. He is covered in tattoos. He has a tattoo on his throat, and he's huge, and his voice is deep. And he's like, he comes out because they kept yelling, come out here, come out here. He comes out, and he's like, what? And I'm looking at him like, I mean, I'm a pretty confident guy, but I looked at him, and I was like, he's way scarier than I thought he would be. My imagination had remembered how scary he was. And he's like, oh, what's up, Dutch? And he gives me a hug. He turns around to walk away. He's got a tattoo of Jesus on his back, flipping you off. And it says no mercy across his shoulders.
Oh, my God.
So that was my introduction to these guys.
Oh, you're telling a story, and I'm in the head going, yeah, I've been in that situation. But you're prepping yourself. And he comes out of the room, and you're like, fuck. All right, now I'm fighting 2 guys. Now I'm fighting 3 guys. And then a dude hugs you. You know what it feels like to be an abused individual, like a spouse that's been horribly abused. Because you're prepping, and the adrenaline build. We'll talk about it another time, but just the adrenaline build up. Now you decompress, and all of a sudden something else happens, and then it comes up again.
And you don't sleep.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting.
You can't sleep.
No.
But like you said, like I said, I would go home and sit. And I know you sat there, but then your brain doesn't shut off. But you're physically exhausted. You know, you do. You feel like you ran out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and you're just wanting to fall asleep, but you can't. You know, you have all these issues that happen to you. This is all, and again, we had to go for mental health checks, right? So you're going for your mental health checks along the way. You're trying to keep your family in check along the way. You know, there's so many other components of this that you and I miss and leave out.
Yeah.
Right? We're making it about work, but at the same time, you're trying to balance life. You're trying to balance relationships, your true relationships and your true life. That's insane, right? You know, I don't know if you want to talk about it or just touch on how is this affecting your home life at the same time.
The problem is coming home, you're doing all this crazy stuff, you know? I mean, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 dope deals with gang members and maybe cartel people and a high propensity for violence. But then you get on an airplane, your flight's late, your baggage ain't come through, you get where you're going, the phone rings. Are you taking them to swimming lessons or am I taking them to swimming lessons?
Right.
And you try your best to click it off, but what happens is you go home, you're mad, you take whoever to swim lessons, and you sit with the parents at swim lessons. You don't fit in.
Right.
They can sense your anxiety. They can sense that your brain is busy. They see you have multiple cell phones. They see how you're dressed.
Right.
And they don't see you often enough to even know which kid's yours, probably. So that has effect on you because,
Sure does.
you know, you want to be a good parent. You want to be a good husband or in a good relationship. But I don't know how it was for you and the other undercover people we worked with. But for me, I also had this like internal drive to be a good undercover and to be a good cop and to be a good investigator and to do these things that I had justified in my mind as good. And I probably unfairly was doing it at the expense of my other relationships.
Yep. I agree with that. I think there's a part of us that our family, listen, they've always backed us and they're part of this and they're part of our family. And of course, I'm providing for them. This is what I do for a living, right? That's how I used to process it, right? Wait a minute. Like some guys are good at laying brick. Other guys are good at doing, you know, prosecuting law cases. You know, this is what I was good at. This was my niche. So this is how I provide for your family. And I think that's what you're saying is we just assumed, you guys, listen, you like all the clothes I'm getting you? You like all the gifts? You like the house? You like everything? I'm providing for you. So let me do my job and let me move on to the next case. But yeah, there's that component. I know what it felt like to get the call and say, who's going to swim practice? Who's going to baseball? Who's going, you know, you're not making it home? You know, really?
Yeah.
Okay, click. You know,
yeah.
It's not their fault. We created this.
I don't even blame them for being upset. And also, like, you know, what kind of relationship can withstand? What do you mean you're leaving? Where are you going?
Right.
Why do you have so many cell phones?
Right.
I've had girlfriends that can't stand to have one cell phone. I can't imagine what it's like for someone important in your life to see you with 6 different phones. Now you're flying to some other state. When you get there, you don't call home. You can't
tell
talk
you where
to
I
them.
am.
You maybe tell them parts of where you're at.
Right.
But eventually they don't even care anymore.
No.
They just know you're gone again.
Yep. Yeah, it takes its toll. Did the training you were given help for that?
I mean, of course, I went to different kinds of training. And I think probably what happened is there's more than one way to do it right.
Right.
And so I think training provided a baseline.
I like the way you said it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Training helped me to establish like what the rules are a little bit, you know, and how do you govern yourself. And one thing is that working undercover is, I mean, I think people think of it as like sneaky or like that we're acting or we're lying. And actually it's the exact opposite. I think when you work undercover, if I did learn anything from training, it's that you have to live with the highest level of integrity, you know,
without a doubt.
Tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. And so training provided kind of that compass to help guide me. But in It's just the baseline.
Yep, I agree. I always defined it as, you know, the easiest way I described it. And people would say, you lie for a living, you know, and you got called out on the stand, so you're a liar. So you lied to my client, you're a liar. And I can't say liar enough, you know.
Yeah,
and it is. We are artists in the way we described it, and you're the art of deception, and it truly is an art, right? Because you're not coaxing these people, you're not entrapping them, you're not, you know, getting them to say what you want them to say. It's just trying to glean that information out of them, what they're doing. So it is an art, you know. It's got to be real careful how you dance around it.
Probably the only thing we really lied about that I lied about was my name and where I was from.
Right.
And a few other things along the way, but for the most part, I stayed true to, as true as I could to just being me, just being Dutch. But I started to take the experiences I learned on the East Coast, working on that case, which was regularly there for a couple of years. And then when I was buying methamphetamine or crank, crystal meth, whatever you want to call it, on the West Coast, when they would be like, what are you doing with all this? I would say, you know what it's worth on the East Coast? I don't even have to know that much about it. I just know it's worth a lot of money. I know I can get it here cheap.
Right.
And I know that they can't get it there cheap. And I'm already here and I'm going there anyway. So I could take what was really happening in my life and just tie it all together. Depending on where you're at, you learn how to walk how they walk. I'm not going to say, hey, hand me the digital scale. No. I'm going to say, clock it. Where's my points? You need to understand there's 50 20s and $1,000. You don't count 20s like we learned in school. You don't count 20, 40, 60, 80. You just make sure the denominator right and you count. And you know, every time you get a 50, there's 1,000. If you count money without confidence, if you don't call out dope that's bunk, it's not real, it's fake. If you don't call it out, they're going to know. They're probably going to know that you're either an informant, a snitch, or a cop.
And you're going to be a victim.
Yeah. Definitely going to get robbed. And two, you're going to lose all your credibility.
Right.
So it was important that you learn all of those things going into that. And that's not something they teach you necessarily. It's just something that you absorb if you can.
No, I think looking in the way you're describing it, I think what people have to understand is you're preparing for a role, right? That's the way I looked at it. And by doing this, and I don't know, maybe looking back, I didn't plan those things. I didn't do it, but certain shirt, certain this, certain that, money in here, how do I wrap my money, how I counted my money. It was always the same because it made me who I am. And what you had said, you touched on it and said, you know, you just became this other person, right? And it's hard. Now, when you show up at these soccer games, you show up at a swim meet or whatever you're going to, you're almost morphing into that guy. And it's so hard to finish it up and then go home to your family after that because all that adrenaline that you're talking about and that high and low and that high, you know, it's the adrenaline dump when you just want to go home and literally just sink into a chair, turn the lights off and go to sleep for 5 days. You know, that's like you just ran 2 marathons in a row.
Yeah, I think for me, I close my eyes and my brain just start running 100 miles an hour. You know, you start thinking about, because what happens is the door locks behind you. You feel that fight or flight urgency, you know, and it's for a second, it's terrifying. And then the next second, you make decisions almost unconsciously to get yourself out of that. It's a fight and a flight. It's both. I'm going to fight my right to flight out of here so I can do whatever. But the problem is you never get the debrief from it. Nope. Because when you're done, you go outside and you meet up with the surveillance team who's tired of being out past their shift.
Yep.
They should have went home hours ago.
You could make this sooner.
They haven't had any good thing to eat. They're bored because you're the one in there doing entertaining stuff. They're just sitting outside watching a building or a dark place or a car or whatever. And you come out, you turn over the dope, you turn over your recording devices, you maybe give a brief synopsis or whatever you have to do, but you don't ever get a chance to decompress it. You don't ever get like, holy shit, man. Like, wow, that was close. Like, they don't, it's not that they don't care. They don't have time.
No.
So you hold it inside yourself. And then for us, because you're not allowed to have interactions with overt people, regular enforcement people, because it can compromise what you're doing, you go back to some crappy hotel.
Or you're undercover
by
apartment.
yourself.
Right.
And you lock the door and you sit in a room and you flip through the channels and you're like, I don't want to do this. And then you try to go to sleep and you don't go to sleep and you just never get to decompress. So over time, it just builds up. So the only time that you're having fun and you're enjoying it is when the adrenaline's kicking in.
Yeah. and to live two different lives. Eventually, like, I know, has there ever been a time when you felt the departments, the agencies that you were working for were turning on you because they thought, you know, like, well, these are your friends, these white supremacists, these bikers, you know, your buddies?
One thing I did to kind of protect against that is I didn't withhold and keep information in. With the peer people that I worked with, my supervisors at a federal level or within my own department at the city, I kept them informed. I did tell them what I was doing. I did tell them where I was at, because by keeping them involved, it kept them from wondering what's he just has a beard, he's covered in tattoos, he drives around a Cadillac, does whatever he wants. So in order to kind of help take away the curiosity of it, tell them what you're up to.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to give all the details. If they don't have the clearance or not allowed to know, or that's fine, but you can at least tell the story and make them feel a part of it. And that helped protect me from them, making them feel like I was outside.
Right. And I think you touched on it, that without mentioning her name, there was one psychologist in particular, right? And, and it's funny because you and I had our similar experiences with her, but they were both the same experience, that she was a solid rock. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And she saw through us. She came from Jersey, you know, and she was that she had that way about her, but she could see when we were off. Right?
Yeah.
And thank God we had those types of people, because, you know, if not, you can spiral down and, you know, go down some dark rabbit holes and just get lost. Right. So I'm grateful. Like, we did have people that genuinely did care, like she did. Yeah. You know, she could see through it, and she was able to talk us off a ledge. And, you know,
I think she kind of made sense of it all. You know, what you're talking about is basically like when they establish a baseline of who you are when you start, before you enter into like a complex undercover world, you're a certain kind of person. And then over time, because of all the things we've been talking about, the high levels of adrenaline, these different identities, the travel, the time changes, the changes and the effects on the way that you walk and talk, whether you mean to or not, it happens. The change of your family and everything, they affect your decision making, they affect your mental health, they affect your emotions, they affect everything. And I think that this particular doctor helped us understand that, hey, this has affected you. I think this is what it is. And if you want to talk to me about that, then you might be able to come back down to something more level, you know?
Right.
It was good.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think that's part of the problem. When going through our career, we weren't trained how to mitigate the trauma that well, right? And it's repeated trauma. Yeah. Right? We go into an op, we're lucky to come out of it. So did that affect how your career ended?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can literally tell you the day that my career ended. And so for 20 years, somewhere around there, it was fine. At 20 and a half or 21 and a half, whatever it wasn't fine anymore. Right. And it wasn't anything, no one did anything to me. Nothing was wrong. I think you touched on there's no way to litigate, you know, what you're dealing with and what you're going through. Other guys and girls went through harder stuff than I did. Other people went through more traumatic things than I did. I'm not complaining. I'm not upset about that. I'm thankful and humbled for these like awesome. I mean, I feel like I lived a movie. I feel like I had 10 lives in one. In this short amount of lifetime, I got to do things that probably only, I mean, you dream about it and you read about it, you watch it on TV, but not very many people really get to do it. Right. But other people went through harder things. But for me, I'd got to a point where I was like, I don't feel this necessity anymore. I don't feel like I'm accomplishing what I need to accomplish, and I can leave now with my sanity and my integrity, or I can continue on this path, which I think I was tired. Right. I was just tired. So I went on Wednesday, I said, I'm never coming back. And on Friday, I had everything packed and turned in, and I was gone, literally that fast. And I wasn't mad. I wasn't upset. I was just done. Right.
How does this make you feel? Sharing your stories, sitting in front of a microphone, doing this, talking about it.
So in my personal life now, I've lived a life. So growing up professionally in that career, you go from wearing a uniform, you're wearing a badge, and you're wearing a gun. And I'll tell you, that's a very powerful feeling. It's not to be taken for granted. It's not to be used to your advantage. It should be with the utmost trust, the utmost respect. And you have to carry it. You have to carry it very carefully, you know what I mean? Right. Then you transition to undercover life, and you have to put that badge and gun away. In fact, most of the time when I worked undercover, I didn't even carry a gun.
Right.
A gun would have got me into more trouble than not. And that sounds crazy to people, but I was rarely armed with a gun when I worked undercover. So now you take away what's kind of become this security blanket, this badge of authority, and this gun on my hip, which is like this protective shield you feel like, and you have to put it away and you can't touch it again. And then you start to live your life where you don't talk about being a professional law enforcement officer. You don't talk about things that you do. Instead, you minimize, you dismiss, you change the subject, and you don't talk about it. And then in my personal life here, I have not been talking about it. I've been keeping it quiet because I think I've always been afraid it would change people's perception of me. Who I am now and who I was then is the same person. But being a law enforcement officer, being a police officer was a job.
Right.
It was not a character trait of mine. It wasn't me trying to get somebody. I just was doing the best I could to be a professional and do a job. So once I left, I didn't want anything to do with it for a while. I just put the badge and the gun and all my stuff away, and I kind of tried to leave that life behind, and I didn't want to talk about it. Well, now enough time's gone by. It's been 6, 7 years. I don't know, something like that. I've been out of that career. I'm no longer tied to anything. And the Mob Museum gave us an opportunity and this really interesting platform to talk about what we got to do, how exciting it was, how fun it was, how scary it was.
Right.
And also just talk about the perspective that we had doing what we're doing. It wasn't just good guys chasing bad guys. It was a life. It was a lifestyle. And this is an opportunity to do that. I think enough time's passed. I think this is a good platform for it. And I'm excited to share it.
I would agree with that. All right. I want to finish up. I want to wrap up by thanking you. Thank you for sharing. It's tough to do this. It's tough to sit in this chair. It's tough for us to sit here and share these stories with you because we're not used to it, right? And microphones in front of us. We're not used to this. It's very uncomfortable for us. So this is like a coming out kind of thing for us, you know? So it's tough. So I just want to acknowledge that to everybody before we wrap this up. And I want to say thank you for sharing it. And I hope this gives you a little glimpse of who our host is for the show, my co-host. I know everything about this man. I think 99.9% of everything I think I know about you. And I can't stress enough how I personally feel, and so many guys that did the work that we did, and I'm going to make you uncomfortable for a minute, but this man is truly a patriot to our country. He hasn't even scratched the surface on some of the stories he's told, some of the things he shared. He truly is a patriot, and some of the things he's done and can never talk about that he has done. Hopefully one day it'll come out and people know the work that you did. And the lives you saved, And that's it. It's a wrap for us. This episode's in the can. Hopefully you'll get to know some more for us and our stories as we share others along the way in other episodes. So we appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
For behind-the-scenes photos, merchandise, and exclusive content, visit InsideTheLife.org. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts.